Welcome to a brief overview of a project that I did. It was for my master's degree, which I did at Birkbeck, University of London. I got a merit, and the degree was in applied statistics and computational data analytics. I'm going to try and make this as brief as I can, and code will go up on GitHub in due course. So, the purpose of this study was to look at income inequality on a macroeconomic scale. In other words, to look at inequality within countries, nations of the world. Also to look at the covariates of trust and social capital. I was inspired partially by Taleb, who I've read every word that he's ever printed, because he said in 2010, can we consider health without considering wild diseases and epidemics? And considering what's happening now in 2020, that seemed to me very far-sighted. So a lot of research has already been done about life expectancy and a correlation between that and inequality in societies. One of the key works that really brought this to the fore was in 2010. It's called The Spirit Level, where the definite correlation was seen between income inequality and life expectancy. So my aim was to look at this area. Obviously, many other people have looked at it as well, but I wanted to bring machine learning into this arena more, although obviously other people have looked at it too. One of the main reasons why it is so important is because globally poverty is falling, income inequality is not falling, and it was even mentioned in the speech made by Barack Obama several years ago. It is one of those key issues. One of the main indices to measure income inequality is the Gini coefficient. So if a country is completely equal, everyone is exactly the same, then the Gini coefficient will be 0, and the country would be on this diagonal line here, y equals x. If a country was completely unequal, then it would be down here on the axes, and the Gini coefficient would be 1. So obviously most countries are somewhere on this bowed curve, this Lorentz curve. The more bowed the curve, the more unequal the society is. And different countries can be compared in terms of the Lorentz curve. So what I aimed to do was to scrape the data from various key websites, the United Nations, World Bank, OECD, WHO, build the machine learning models, then triangulate them, make sure that I fine-tuned the parameters and that I'd cross-validated. First of all, I looked at missingness, and you can see it's only 4% in the data that I found, and therefore I felt that was acceptable. I'll come back to this later. So there were various covariates that I focused on, and the models that I built were firstly unsupervised learning models, where you are trying to just basically get a feel for the data, understand it a little bit better. Cluster analysis, factor analysis, and canonical variate analysis. Then I moved on to supervised learning models. So I started on linear models and then moved into support vector machines, neural nets, KNN, splines, decision trees, and then ensemble methods like random forests, bagging and boosting. So the unsupervised learning techniques helped me to see that countries were basically in three very clear groups of sort of high inequality, medium inequality and low inequality. And this is borne out here by the three main areas, the red, the blue and the pink in the cluster analysis. But one of the focuses of my study was support vector machines and other machine learning models. Here you can see I'm tuning the parameters, KNN, splines, and I will show you a summary slide of this in a minute. I spent a lot of time building neural networks. Here's the most successful one, 6531, but there were many other networks that I built. I looked at decision trees and then went into ensemble methods such as random forests, bagging and boosting. So I compared all these different machine learning models in terms of RMSE. So RMSE is robust to outliers, which is why I favoured it compared with MAE. The lower the RMSE, the better the model. KNN was the least efficacious model, but that is why it's often used as sort of exploratory model as opposed to a favoured model in a lot of studies. The splines were really quite effective. Neural nets were pretty good. Random forests are often used, but in this case were effective, but not particularly better or worse than support vector machines. So then I moved on to look at the data with regards to other models. So I looked at partial least squares regression, which is an iterative model where you have an inner model and an outer model, and the way it works is that it iteratively builds between the outer and the inner. I did do exploratory work with principal component analysis as well, and it was more or less as effective as partial least squares regression in terms of understanding the covariates. So perhaps it would be best to just stick with PCA because it said more or less the same things as the much more complex model. I then built some longitudinal models, GLMM and EEE, and some Bayesian simulations. Here's the transition matrix for the different years in which the data was present, because I was trying to see whether you could predict data into the future from 2020. But I used Gibbs sampler, and then I compared all the different models. As you can see, it's quite a confused picture because these are the covariates where there's been the most variance after cross-validation, and you can see that some models favour some covariates, some models favour the others. So I began to think maybe it might be better to rework the study, but to look at the covariates. And one of the problems I felt was why this picture here was quite confused was because there's quite high correlation between some of the key variables. So we have here 0.68, 0.84, 0.63. So as we all know, 1 means a perfect correlation. So I felt that it would be better to look further at how these different key covariates were correlated before running the models and then rerun the models. However, I did find that income inequality does predict life expectancy, and trust and social capital are key variables in that model. I looked at ways of automating what I had done in terms of an automated statistician, and obviously this is quite a complex thing to do, and it's definitely very, very exciting and challenging, but it's a work in progress. I felt that there was so much more to be uncovered in this area, so I started looking at interactive heat maps, trying to understand the different countries a little bit better, a chloropleth map, which I've also drawn in another video about oil production, so I won't talk about all of that there. And then I started building a Shiny app, which did really help me actually with the interactive way that you can build histograms and other models from it. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry.